Hey guys, welcome back. We're just going to cut right through the small talk and get right into it with our video.
2008 or 2009, and that was the advent of the smartphone. It was like big airplanes flew over the country and dropped smartphones on everybody. That's the biggest change in society since the Industrial Revolution. Think about it.
Yeah.
We went from walking around with our heads up like this to down. People check their phone an average of 352 times a day. Think about 352 times a day.
That's insane.
Now that's adults and children alike. And look what happened to kids. When I turned 16, when I was 15 and 364 days, 23 hours, and 59 minutes, I was at the DMV waiting to get my driver's license, right? Now, kids turn 16, they don't even go get their driver's license. Yeah, I'll get it sometime.
Yep.
They start dating later. They start having sex later. They get their driver's license, everything later.
Yeah.
Wow.
So done to us. They dropped the mobile devices. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I do think obviously that it is alarming to hear that much time that you're spending looking at your phone, but there's a lot of truth to that.
That's true.
And I think it's caused a lot of changes in society that we wouldn't have thought imaginable. I mean, like, when was the last time you went into a restaurant and you saw people actually talking and not looking at their phones?
Right. Absolutely. You see the bar area and everyone is down,
it's like we're going to have like a hunchback syndrome at some point because our heads are usually like this. You've got to remind yourself to sit up straight and not, crick your neck. So yeah. And I have a son who's 13.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a phone yet.
You know what? That is such an interesting choice. I'm going to get into that with you, but yes, change is of the essence. I feel like, especially with technology, we have so much change happening at such a fast pace.
So fast.
And that would be the essence of our podcast today. So guys, welcome to Alia & Co., the podcast where we talk about complex things in a world that is being rewritten by technology. And it's baffling how fast we're moving. So our subject matter today, change. And we have a wonderful guest with us today, Susan Mendoza. Please introduce yourself.
So my name is Susanna Mendoza.
Mendoza.
I joke around that everybody calls me Susan. Okay. So it's like, do not feel bad at all. But it'll give me an opportunity to correct it because I'm actually named after my mother, who my father said he named me after the strongest, most beautiful woman he'd ever met. And that was my mom.
I love it.
And her name is Susanna, which is now mine. And I joke around that the A at the end, it's not silent, and neither am I.
Well, and it's important to be not silent, I would say, especially in a world where we're undergoing so many changes.
For sure. You have to know your voice and know how to employ it as, a weapon for good and sometimes to push back, right? And so I am the proud daughter of Mexican immigrants. My mother and father both came from Mexico, and I'm the youngest of 3 kids. I think I define myself today as a very, very blessed mother of a 13-year-old son and a very happy wife, a sister, a daughter, and a friend, right? And then on top of that, I happen to be the state controller for the state of Illinois.
You just so happen to be the state. Exactly. So before we get into it, because I want to talk about the essence of who you were as a child and where you were headed, and especially to get involved in government is such a big feat to some degree. It's very convoluted. People don't understand it. But to want to make a change is it's such a novel, it's an important thing, But I want to talk about what a state comptroller is, because I think a lot of people out there, sometimes we have some very, very smart people that feel stupid sometimes because they're just kind of afraid to ask. So please explain what a state comptroller does, just so we can simplify this.
Sure, and nobody should feel stupid. I mean, it is the least known title in all of government existence, I think, but it's the most important title you may have not heard of, but you need to know. So I am the state's chief financial officer. So most people have heard the term CFO, right? You know what a CEO is, CFO. I'm the CFO, but for the state of Illinois. So I manage all of the money that comes into the state of Illinois and goes out of the state of Illinois. It's my office that, we're known as like, the checkbook lady, if you want to think about it that way. I manage the state's checkbook, but so much more than that. Mm-hmm. So the checkbook, of course, is in control of the controller. Mm-hmm. So think of it that way. The state treasurer, which is a separately elected statewide constitutional office, mm-hmm. he invests the state's money. So like as revenues come in, there's different types of security vehicles that the treasurer will invest the money in to produce returns on those revenues coming into the state. But when it's time to pay the bills, it's my office that issues those payments. Mm-hmm. The two do not have access to each other for a good reason, because back in 1965, we had what was called the Auditor of Public Accounts. And this person performed the functions of both the treasurer and the controller. So to make it really easy for you to follow this, the person with access to the cash also had immediate access to the checkbook. Mm-hmm. And in Illinois, unfortunately, this person was convicted of embezzling $6 million. Mm-hmm. And so back in 1970, they changed the Constitution to separate the functions of those two offices to serve as an independent check and balance mm-hmm. on each other and the rest of the executive branch, the governor's office, for example. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward to 2012. By the way, $6 million, to put it in context, would be worth today over $50 million. Okay. So it was a huge embezzlement. Mm-hmm. Then in 2012, the controller/treasurer of Dixon, Illinois, this woman by the name of Rita Crundwell, mm-hmm. who they've made like documentaries on Netflix. Mm-hmm. She was like the horse lady. Yeah. Everyone thought she was rich, but mm-hmm. she was actually rich from stealing money from the taxpayers. Mm-hmm. She embezzled $54 million, mm-hmm. which would be well over $60 million today. So like obviously in Illinois, we haven't figured out how to do this correctly. Mm-hmm. The two largest government embezzlement schemes in the history of America both happened in the state of Illinois, where the treasurer and controller were held by the same person. So mm-hmm. I manage the money in a very responsible way. Mm-hmm. The state treasurer invests the money, and I make sure that the bills get paid, but also that, for example, bonding, which is borrowing, mm-hmm. I have to sign off on it. The treasurer has to sign off on it. The governor signs off on it. Mm-hmm. So there is a check and balance in place. Mm-hmm. But I say that because it's important that whoever the controller is be independent of the other members of the executive branch mm-hmm. so that they're only accountable, in fact, to the taxpayers. That's you. Mm-hmm. Your hard-earned money, I'm supposed to be a watchdog for it, and I have been.
Oh, amazing. And that's the thing is, though, as you're saying, there's an evolution, right? Yes. Things happen. You realize that you need to put systems in place to be able to have this safety net for your, the citizens, right? And so that being said, that is a process that might take years, right? These kinds of spaces, like in terms of government, like the institutions, the systems take a little bit of time to be built. Yet, when we look at the world of technology and how fast it's moving, do you think that when it comes to government, we're kind of just trying to catch up? I mean, I feel like within the past 2 years, we've had so many changes, just society, technology, everything. There's been so many changes. So I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit about that process, at least your experience with it when you see there's so much change that needs to be had. Historically, it takes a long time. How are we going to catch up? How can we move faster when it comes to that?
That's a great question. And clearly, the world is moving much faster than government structures. Mm-hmm. Even in the private sector, it still takes a minute or two, right? Mm-hmm. To move forward with an idea for something that requires change or investment in technology. Mm-hmm. Imagine what that looks like at the government level. Right. And let me give you just a quick, take it back a little bit, to give you an idea of why I feel the way I do about investing in technology and, capitalizing on this and looking at change as a good thing, mm-hmm. but knowing how to explain it to your customer base, whether it's private sector or government sector. But I grew up at very, I would say, poor. My family, Mexican immigrants. I was born in Little Village, beautiful neighborhood of Chicago. But on the block that we lived on, it was a really tough block, lots of gang activity, shootings, things of that nature. And every day I remember holding my older brother's hand, who was 8 years older than I was. I was 8, he was 16. That is a big difference and a very important one when you're talking about a gang-infested block, to be a 16-year-old boy, right? So he would hold my hand and he'd say, okay, flaquita, which means like skinny one, not so skinny anymore, but back in the day, he'd say, okay, flaquita, just don't look at anyone. You just hold my hand and we get to school without getting shot. Those were conversations we would have all the time. And the same was true on the walk back home, right? And so I didn't think that was weird, Ali. It was all I knew, right? And Then there was, in fact, a shooting too close to home. And my mom and dad said, that's it, we're done. And they packed us up literally overnight in our old station wagon, everything that would fit. And they moved us to this suburb called Woodridge, Illinois, where we rented a house for a few years until my parents could, put together enough money to buy a home in Bolingbrook, Illinois. But this whole time, we still kept coming back to the neighborhood, right, to get haircuts, to buy our groceries, because back then there were no Mexicans out in Woodridge, Illinois.
I see.
And I like to eat good food, right?
Yeah, right.
So no rice, beans, frijoles, carne, all that stuff. We would buy it at the butcher in the neighborhood. And so I never lost that touch, but I didn't have to worry about like this fear of getting shot. It dissipated. And over the years, I came to realize what a difference it was for me to grow up in an environment where I was safe, where I never had to have that conversation on my way to school, where the worst thing that could happen to me was a bird pooping on me on my way to school, right? Nothing bad was going to happen. And that every public school was a good school, right? And so like to take this kid who might have had a very different outcome on that block if I had stayed, and then put me in just a different environment with safety and good schools, it made all the difference in the world for me. And so when I graduated college, I moved back to that neighborhood that I felt that I had been run out of, because that's where I wanted to make a difference. And so one of the things that I experienced, so I ran for state representative, just to give you the quick bio. I served 6 terms in the state house as a state rep. I was the youngest member of the 92nd General Assembly. I was in my late 20s. Served 6 terms, and then I was elected the first woman city clerk of Chicago. And this is where the tech comes in. Because for years, I had, like every other Chicagoan who had a car in this city, had to go wait in a 3 to 4 hour long line to pay a tax. Is that crazy or what?
That sounds like a lot of time wasted.
Did you ever have to do that?
No.
Do you have a car here?
I do have a car, but I've moved around quite a bit. So
okay. Yeah. So people back before 2013 had to wait 3 to 4 hours in line to buy a tax that was only issued. The city sticker was issued once a year in the month of June. So when these stickers first started 100 plus years ago in 1908,
and that's not a joke.
Yeah, it's not a joke. Legitimately, 1908. It was a handful of Ford Model Ts that had come on the road. There were horses and buggies back in Chicago in those days. And so the people were like, oh my goodness, how are we going to repair the streets? So I, in my mind, imagined like women sauntering over to City Hall and paying their fee. And they were rich, right? Because the only people that had Ford Model Ts were super wealthy people. And then fast forward 108 years, we're still selling them in the month of June. But now there's 1.3 million people. Yeah. And so to your point about technology, like you always start with people, process, technology, right? And I'm like I love tech. I'm super tech savvy, and I feel like we need to lean into innovation as a source of good, not fear it, right? Just make it work, make things work better. And so I remember standing in that line going, oh my goodness, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so when I ran for city clerk, that was my pitch. I was going to get rid of the city stickers. And you know what? I did. Yeah. I didn't get rid of the stickers. I was going to get rid of the city sticker lines.
Right. And there's a process actually that, I've heard about that you brought in your family members.
Oh my goodness. You heard that?
Yeah. So tell us about that.
I did. So like my first week on the job is right in the middle of city sticker season. We were preparing for the June sales in May. I was sworn in May of 2011. And, one of, the things when I'm touring the office, I go downstairs and there's this gigantic bin. I mean, a humongous, like it looked like a dumpster of city sticker renewal applications that they were all the way to the top. And I'm like, what is this? And they're like, oh, these are the applications that get sent in from the Chicagoans across the city. And they were literally processing these applications from the top of the pile. But it was like, you'd think they're letters to Santa at Christmas, right?
Yeah, right.
So I'm like, there's no system here for sorting the mail as it comes in. And then I realized one of my supervisors said that, oh, they did a great job this weekend. They just knocked out, these 4 bins. And I'm like, what do you mean by 4 bins? And they showed me these post office bins, right, with letters stacked all the way up. And they go, we had to have overtime. We had the employees in over the weekend, and we knocked out 4 of these bins. And they had like 8 employees doing this. Right. And I said, okay, walk me through like how you process these applications. So I want to learn. So they taught me It was not hard, okay? It was easy. They call them clean or dirty. If they're dirty, if they're lacking something, clean if they're good to go.
Okay.
Long story short, I'm thinking to myself, there's no scenario where I think it should take 8 employees overtime to knock out just 4 bins. So I decided to test it. And I invited my mom, who spoke limited English, my Aunt Maria, who didn't speak any English because she was visiting. She was on vacation from Mexico. A secretary who worked in the clerk's office who had never processed a city sticker in her life, right? She was a customer-facing one, but not a sticker person. And then my deputy chief of staff, who I brought with me, so new to the clerk's office. And it was so my mom, my aunt, me, the secretary. There were 5 of us, right? And we knocked out 16 bins versus 4 with less people who don't even work at the clerk's office, but just with my knowledge of now how I'm supposed to process these applications. And then I made the decision that, wow, this is not a good use of taxpayer money. The supervisors are eligible for overtime. In no scenario does it make sense for a supervisor to be eligible for overtime. So I decided we would institute something called Novertime. And unless if my deputy chief of staff approved the use of overtime, we were going to drive this process of doing more with less. And all hands on deck, right? We've got to get these applications out the door, but we learned the fundamentals of every touch point of who has to deal with the city sticker application, from the person collecting it and putting it in the bin, but also all the people who had to cancel out, the senior citizens who canceled their checks because their applications are always the first that get mailed in. They're super good about paying their bills on time. They send in their application right away on the first day. They were at the bottom of the bin and they got scared that maybe their check was stolen. So they canceled out their checks. So then that is even more work for us because now we've got to get them to redo a check and all these things. So long story short, having walked into like a dumpster fire of inefficiency and saying, okay, how do we fix this? I mean, that is like my jam. I love that, because I can think a million different ways of doing it better, but incorporating every person who for years, decades had worked there and had a touch point was really critical to getting us to adopt the changes that were going to be necessary moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's amazing that you can go into a space specifically like that. And I think a lot of politicians, leaders within like these spaces that are governing these entities, like for me, the experience I've had in government is with the assessor's office, with the whole property tax sort of space. There was a time where I remember I was, put in a FOIA request, and the amount of information that I had asked for, basically, the people that were working there didn't have enough bandwidth because they're being paid, they have like their salary, right?
Sure.
And they can't allot that much time to just doing what I have asked. They have all these other things that they have to do. And I would say in some ways, in terms of the employees, they're kind of stuck in these sort of processes that have been done manually. And, for them to escalate it to be able to create like, some sort of like new change, to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. What kind of leader does it take for someone to come in, do an audit of the entire process, and then actually change it? Because, you had some autonomy there, and
Yes.
a lot of these institutions do not. So, I mean, I'd love
Right.
to learn more about that.
I think the difference is having a leader who has a vision and who's not risk averse. So I have never been risk averse. I feel like if I'm going to run for an office, it's because I feel that I'm the person most qualified for it. And I'm going to put all my chips on the table and ask voters to judge me on my qualifications and my track record. And, I had been a state rep for 6 terms. I know how to get things done. That's like my superpower. And I hate wasting time, because wasting time, whether it's on the government side, but especially on the business side, is wasted money. And also constituents, like why should any constituent have to come wait in a line for 3 to 4 hours? Most of the people that have to do that are poor. They're struggling. They have to take a day off of work or use a vacation day, or worse yet, just not go to work and lose wages that day on top of the tax that they have to pay. And so I always think about my service from the eyes of like if I were the constituent.
Right.
I think like that is, you need a leader who understands that our job is to actually work for you, not the other way around, and to make your life easier.
Right.
And so I really wear that as like a source of pride. If I worked in the private sector, I'd want my customers to think that my business is the best because they get awesome treatment. Why would we treat our taxpayers any differently? So I've always been driven by a customer service mentality. And, wanting to get rid of this was a big deal, because the coolest story I can tell you about this is related to the risk factor, which most politicians are absolutely risk averse. We all talk about all the cool things we want to do when we're asking for your vote. But then once you get elected, all of a sudden you become super risk averse. And I'm like, not like that at all. I'm like, okay, if I tell you I'm going to try something, I'm going to do it. Like you put me there, I'm going to go for it. So when I first went to talk to the mayor of Chicago about my idea to get rid of the just once a year city sticker and make it a year round system, it was Mayor Emanuel at the same time. We both came in at the same time, independently elected, right? People voted for me, people voted for him. We both won. But I was going to have to work with the mayor and work with the city council and pass my not transparency, but in this case, modernization effort through the council. And so I had to change the law that required me to sell them in the month of June and put in place a new sales system. And I had to put on an RFP and do all these things that I didn't want the mayor to purposely be trying to block. Right. So I said, you've got your agenda. Here's my agenda. I don't need you to hold my hand. I just need you to get out of my way. Right. Like I got to pass these laws. I don't want you to make it difficult for me. Just get out of the way. I know how to do it. You do your thing. I'll do mine. And so he said to me, and he said it in the best of intentions. So he wasn't trying to be a jerk. I just, for the record, people have their feelings about Ron, but I'm just going to say I truly believe he was trying to give me good advice. He said to me, listen, kid, I've advised 2 presidents of the United States of America. I think you should heed my advice. And he's like, don't do it. And I said, what do you mean don't do it? And he's like, it's too big of a lift. It's too big of a lift. If you take this on, and you fail, and he used more colorful language, but I won't for your podcast. But it was, kind of funny, but he's like, if you, F this up, he's like, you won't be reelected city clerk. You won't be elected dog catcher. He's like, city stickers are an effing pilgrimage. It's in our DNA as Chicagoans. It's been like this for over 100 years. Why do you think no one has taken this on? Because it's too hard of a lift. Too much not enough risk reward on this one, right? Or I could say too much risk for the reward. So he's like, everyone loves to bitch about this. We all do, but no one expects you to actually fix it. So if you try and you fail, you're done. And I said, well, I appreciate your advice, and I'm certainly not a president. I'm like, but I didn't run for this office to just be like every guy before me comes in, turns on the light, and is okay with looking at those lines, be 3 to 4 hour long lines, thinking about those people and what they had to give up for us to make their day as hard as possible in being compliant with the law, right? That's not why I ran. So I would rather lose, but lose trying than know that I maybe had a shot at fixing this and didn't do it. Right. So I said, look, here's the deal. If I fail, I will own it 100%. I'm a big girl. You had nothing to do with it. But just remember when I succeed that you had nothing to do with it. And that was his reaction. And he said, hey, cool. That's totally good. Great meeting you and good luck. But, I think he probably thought I was nuts. But, 3 years into my first term, I fully transitioned the entire city of Chicago away from this once a year city sticker system. We got the Harvard Kennedy School of Business Bright Idea Award for it, raised $15 million in new revenue for the city of Chicago at the time without raising the cost of the city sticker, just by providing better service at lower costs to taxpayers. We gave them their day back, not their life back, but certainly that day back. I would say put money back in their pocket because they didn't have to take public transport to go wait in this long line. You could do it online. Buy a 1 year or a 2 year sticker.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And back then people used to promote the office as it's the second largest office in the city after the mayor's and the most visited office in City Hall. And I would say, why is that a selling point? Because you shouldn't have to come visit my office unless if you just want to come by and say hi. Right. Because the less time you're having to go do things in government, I think the better for you as a taxpayer, right? Or as a business person or whatever. So this has always been my thing is I have a 25-year track record of identifying problems, taking on big ones and fixing them. It's awesome. Yeah. That's what I like to do.
So that experience, certainly there must be a certain framework that you're using in terms of triaging a problem. Yep. Do you think that specific case, because, you've done a lot with the budget which we were going to get into with the large backlog of payments, et cetera. But do you think that that's a framework that you can actually pass along to other issues, other spaces where there's not a lot of efficiency? Like, for example, I mean, I didn't have a car back then. I've been in Chicago since 2000, and I remember there were meters back then. And I remember it's like they were just asking for that meter to run out and then just give you a ticket. And so like the philosophy of most people that would be driving would be like, they're setting us up, right? Because who's going to park their car on Michigan Avenue and go to the lake and, and then we'll go somewhere far off and then have to come back and then, put 2 quarters in, it just doesn't work.
You feel like you're getting nickeled and dimed, right?
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah. But that framework of change, right? Someone was just like, all right, let's use this company. And now we're not, you can renew your payments with an app, et cetera. That's a lot easier. So, when it comes to issues like that, because there are a lot of issues like that that are happening in the city, on the state level, so many issues. I mean, do you find that could be that framework would apply to other places that you can create actionable change?
Oh, of course. I mean, 100%. Some of the best ideas just come from somebody having a problem, right? So you have a problem and most people don't think that you can fix it. Maybe they're not in the position to fix it, but I hear about it and I'm like, oh, I am in a position to fix it, right? So we fix it. But also remember that a lot of the things that we see now in our day-to-day, those cool apps and stuff like that stuff's sexy. And so everyone wants to be in that space. But the other really critically important space to be in is the one that nobody sees, the behind the scenes operations of systems, right? Cybersecurity, no one's thinking about it until you've been hacked. Then you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't we have these things in place? And then you're thinking there's a lot of super boring work that goes into the side that the constituents never see. But that's
what
actually the most important
part. I would
part.
love to know more about what is that work? Because it's like, people say that there's work, or it's like, it's like, okay, well, if I'm elected to office, oh, it's so hard, I can't do it. Like that risk averseness. Yeah. What is that? Can you elaborate on that? Because I think that a lot of people are confused about what the steps are.
Well, I think one of the biggest confusion points is that everyone assumes because we have literally the world at our fingertips with our smartphone, that government runs the same way. And that, well, why is this agency not talking to that agency? And why can't I go to one place for all my stuff is a perfect example.
Right.
And it's because the actual government systems, still many of them are on mainframes. Like young people today don't even know what that is. Like they don't know what a phone booth is. You think they know what a mainframe is? And they're green screens. They definitely don't talk to each other. They're like these massive workhorses that churn out the payments or the data points, but they're not fancy. They don't talk to each other. It's not like today you can literally go on Gemini on your phone and ask it a million questions. It's going to churn out a ton of info. And people should be doing that, by the way. But government systems don't run like that. And they're hundreds of millions of dollars to modernize these systems. It's not an easy lift. So we're in the middle of a modernization effort in the controller's office because you know how I say they're sexy and non-sexy? Like everyone that I pay $55 billion worth of bills a year in my office. And you don't think about it. You're going to go to sleep and know that whether it's the DMV that's getting the money that I'm supposed to send them to be able to keep their offices open, or it's the schools that your kids go to that get their funding, or it's if you have a child with disabilities and the worker that cares for that child, they're able to do that because they're getting paid, right? Now imagine if our system shuts down because there's a fault in our system. All of a sudden, the totally unsexy thing that you took for granted is now the most important thing that you're thinking about. And so I have to make sure that even though there's no fanfare in having the most up-to-date, modern accounting or payroll systems, because you don't actually see that. You get your check, but you don't think about all of the work that goes into the data points for that check to physically be issued or sent to your bank. That's a lot of really nerdy, wonky, a lot of mainframe being converted to cloud-based systems. It's high tech. But the problem is too that government is at a snail's pace. Even with someone like me pushing, it's still the level overall is one that runs much slower than the private sector does. And so you're you start off with an idea for a project of how cool and modern it's going to be. And then by the time you're wrapping it up, you're like, darn it, I want to be 10 steps further ahead now because this is how fast technology is moving.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like at least in our office, we're going to have a lot more functionality, reports that can be churned out so that we can do more like predictive analytics, a better return on investment models for taxpayers to be able to better follow their money. But in every space that you're in, whether it's a government space or it's even in your own home, you've got to figure out how you leverage the technology that's available today to make your life easier. Most people talk to Alexa.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
We didn't have an Alexa before. That would have seemed like super futuristic not that long ago. And that's, you're weird if you don't have an Alexa now almost, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, certainly there's a lot of change that needs to be had. And in some ways, I think maybe government needs to be cautious, right? You're dealing with a lot, like billions of dollars, right? You're dealing with a lot of money. You don't want to make that mistake. And I'll just give an example. I had a friend that like 25 plus years ago was designing these AI systems. He ended up selling to the police department, right? So what he designed was, something that kind of like predicted the movements and of what it looks like for someone that is about to commit a crime, right? Okay. And so this was 25 years ago maybe when he was working on this. And that was like a cool novel idea where it's like, wow, we can predict who's about to commit a crime, But that was then, right? And I think that in terms of governance and the way that the laws are, sometimes they have to move slow because if you just quickly start adopting something, it's like Minority Report,
For sure.
You're in a situation where, there's profiling happening, et cetera. So in some ways, I think government should move slow because sometimes you don't know what the negative aspects of technology could be as you bring them in. But there are,
very good point. Yes. I think on the back end of those things, government needs to move slow. On the front end of servicing the customer, we need to be efficient, move quick, and be nimble, right? But
manual processes.
Again, those are,
like anything that is something that basically is taking up and consuming your time, where that you wouldn't hire somebody to sit there for, 20 hours doing something like that when AI can do it very fast, But so now tell us, so that's great. And this is just like a fun question, but what do you think about AI government?
So I think there's a lot of applications for it. I think we're still nascent though, right? So I think of AI like it's really interesting to me. I play around with it myself for fun, not in the context of my controller stuff yet. We are having these discussions and having some fun experiments with it, and then we crack up at how wrong it is most of the time, right?
Absolutely.
So we're using it in the sense of like practicing with it, but not related to payments of any kind of thing. It's more like we're all just kind of practicing with it on our own. We have these meetings and we're like, hey, look, here's what the AI said. And we're like, it's totally wrong, right? So thankfully, we know not to incorporate it into our systems yet. Do I see someday that being an integral part of everyone's systems? Of course, but government's certainly not there yet. But AI, I like to explain to people instead of freaking out about it, that this is the future, right? It is the future. And we have to think about how we put regulations in place to protect people from overreach in this space. But at the same time, not discourage people from using AI or learning about it because they either will learn it or they'll be left behind, right? That's the new reality. You can fight it all you want, but that is the new reality. It's like a whole new Pandora's box has been opened up with this. And so I do think that there are applications for it, but it's like a toddler. So like years ago, it was like an idea, right? And then it was like, oh, there's a baby forming. And then now the baby was born. It's clearly doesn't know how to speak yet, but you know that it's there. And it's kind of like AI, right? And then as it's getting a little bit older, you're like, oh my gosh, look at all the cool things it can do. It can talk. Oops, that's not how you say that, honey. Right? Think about it as a mom. You're a mom.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're like super impressed at how smart your little toddler is, but you still acknowledge that your toddler is still wrong most of the time.
Yeah, this could be
and
true.
is learning. And so the AI tool is kind of like that. It's like a learning little human being. But the scary part is that in a matter of just a few years, that AI model that today is still like wrong a lot is going to likely be smarter than the smartest human being that's ever lived, right? And so I think that is where people are like, whoa, what's going to happen? And how's that going to impact all kinds of jobs across the world, not just America, but also like, I've always been an eternal optimist. I feel like where other people immediately get scared about tech, I see opportunity and I say, okay, well, how do we make this work for us? Because at the end of the day, the human being is still like amazing as far as I'm concerned. And I think we will figure out how to put protections in place, but also leverage and create greater efficiencies without hurting people in the process. And for people who think that just because things are getting modernized or we're introducing technology, that means that of course you're going to lose your job. My experience has been different. We didn't go on some killing spree of employment in the clerk's office. We actually just had our employees doing more efficient things with their time.
Right.
They were more helpful to constituents because, for example, analyzing legislation coming in that the clerk's office was responsible for doing as well. We didn't have enough people to do that. But now, because we didn't need as many people since we had this cool, modern, functioning system, that we could leverage our employees to just do different skill sets that were actually adding value to the taxpayers who sent me to do this job for them.
And value for them too, because who wants to do these rote manual things over and over again? I mean, you want to be, and that's what I believe is that especially AI still needs us to learn.
100%.
Right? It's learning from us. And so if we're what it's learning from, then, we need to be very mindful about the way that we use it. I think that there is a lot of fear when it comes to technology and people don't bother. And those are the people, usually that's where that whole AI is going to take my job comes from because they won't tinker with it. And I think the fear is big, and so actually let's segue into from technology to transparency, and that's what you've been doing with all of these budget overpayments, and how important do you find being transparent about the things that you are doing, because I think processes need transparency, especially with the clerk's office explaining, how the process of you doing the permits budget wise. What was the overpayment? Was it a big problem that just accumulated over time or one small thing or, so tell us about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I walked into a absolute fiscal nightmare. I ended up having to navigate our state through a $16.7 billion backlog of unpaid bills. That didn't happen overnight, but it was more than tripled within just 2 years. So prior to that, Democrats and Republican governors, so governors of both parties, were at fault, as were legislatures, right? So this is not on one individual person. It's really fun to try to just blame one person for all this financial collapse, but it was many years of irresponsible decisions, of having difficulty telling constituent groups no, right? It's hard for you to tell your kid no to Disney World every year, but you have to, right? And so government has for many years been very anti-transparent. And I truly believe that transparency is critical because it breeds accountability. So when I became controller and having to navigate the state through the worst fiscal crisis in its history, I had to know what I was up against. And I couldn't see it, believe it or not. I was a CFO, unable to see the expenditures that had been occurred under the governor of an opposite party who wouldn't share that information with me. And I'm supposed to manage the backlog.
Isn't that public information?
You would think. Guess what? It wasn't.
How so? Is that something that was later put in place? Or?
Yes. So many gazillion years ago when they created the office, they required one report once a year from all the different state agencies that report to the governor. Because remember, we're independently elected, right? I control my employees, but I don't have any oversight over the governor's employees, all the different state agencies that he handles, the university systems that, again, fall under the purview of the governor. And so in this case, I had a governor who was making terrible financial decisions, got 8 credit downgrades in 2 years. And I walked into that. And $1 billion plus in late payment interest penalties, because when we don't pay our bills on time, after 90 days, we start to accrue a 1% a month penalty. And so we hadn't paid our bills in 2 years plus. So I was paying 12% interest on almost $17 billion of unpaid bills. Okay. So we had racked up well over $1 billion on top of the 17 of unpaid bills, just in interest payments, penalties. So long story short, I had to come in here and say, why can I not see all of the expenditures? I'm telling you it's 16.7, but at the time I didn't know. I thought it was 10. Yeah. And then I went to bed one night and I woke up and it was 11 billion. And I'm like, how did that happen? Ooh, okay. I thought I was going to pay these bills this month or tomorrow. And then I wake up and there's an extra $1 billion that were 11 months old. Bills for people who had been waiting almost a year to get paid. Wow. And so I said, why can't I see this? This is my first week on the job. And it's because they had passed a law that said that all these agencies only had to report to the CFO once a year. The report was due in October, and it was only current as of June 30th of that year. So by the time I got it, it was already 90 days out of date. So incurring late payment interest penalties. And when I was in the legislature and we're crafting budgets in May, we just all assumed that the data that we're getting from the controller's office is up to date.
Right.
Why would you think anything other than that? That was your first question. Because no one knew this. It happened so long ago, and that's always how it had been. So think about it. You're crafting a budget in May, and the deadline is May 31st, with numbers that are only current from June 30th of the prior year. So all your math is off, right? So we were carrying these huge backlogs that no one knew about because you couldn't see them, and they wouldn't report them. So I ended up having to pass transparency legislation so that I could actually see how much money are these different agencies sitting on? Like not the money, but the bills. Are they 0 to 30 days old, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, or how many are over 90 days, and what are the late payment interest penalties associated with them? I literally had to pass a law that would allow me to get this data in a monthly way. Why can't I get it daily? Because as I said, our systems are archaic and they don't talk to each other. But at least have them sending me that data every month, because then just like you at home would be figuring out what bills you have to pay first and which ones you don't want to be accruing late payment interest penalties. You pay the ones with the highest interest first. You pay the ones that are absolute needs, not wants. You know, you've got to prioritize. And that's what I got to doing. But believe it or not, the governor vetoed that legislation because he said it was too overly burdensome. But it's because they didn't want the truth as to how dysfunctional our state was from a financial perspective to come out and be talked about. So I overrode his veto unanimously in the House of Representatives. I spent 6 terms in the state house. I know how to get things done there. And that was the beginning of the financial turnaround for the state of Illinois, because now I could see the damage. And I always say, I'm not scared of the damage. I'm scared of what I can't see.
Right.
But I'm not scared of the damage. If you're driving a car and you see a pothole, you can avert it. But if you drive over a puddle and it turns out there's a huge pothole there, you just lost your tire, that's what you should be concerned about. So by not being able to see the things, that's where you exponentially grow your problems. Being able to see the problems allows me to get to work on fixing them and carving a plan of attack. And that's what we did. And that's why we now have 10 credit upgrades on my watch. And I started with $48,000 in our rainy day fund to deal with $17 billion in debt. We now have $2.4 billion and growing. And it was 210 business days to pay a vendor. If you did business with us, it was the average delay was 210 business days the day I walked in. But for the last 4 years, my oldest bill has been about 13 days old. Wow. I'm kind of like the Speedy Gonzalez of state payments.
That's amazing.
Rápido.
Exactly. But that's such an interesting, you grow up thinking politicians are corrupt, right? I think, in some ways I can see why people get that bad rep, is that in places where there's no transparency, it does breed for corruption, because there's no accountability, right? No one knows. And from the perspective of someone that is, a citizen of that you want to be able to have, you're fearful because you don't understand. You don't, it's like a black box. You don't know what you're getting, where it's going, who's accountable, like what the process is. And I have seen, especially with technology, how we've had to be more accountable to the users, It's really nice to see that trend happening. When would you say that shift started to happen, where, now more so I'm seeing public information, and then being able to, within a certain amount of time, you need to make sure that you're reporting back, when do you find that there was a big change in politics in general, where you're seeing that the advent of just this transparency has made making decisions and pushing things through easier?
Yeah, I would say probably over the last 10 years. When I was city clerk, I think I was on the cutting edge of all that stuff because nobody really talked about it and people were afraid to take on these big initiatives. But I always feel like if you tell the story of the why, right? This is, again, from a tech perspective, people, process, technology. Because technology sounds cool, but not all technology is what you want to use for a specific problem. You always have to identify what's the problem, and that's based on the person that you want to help. And then you have to figure out, okay, well, what are the processes that have to be fixed or addressed to make this problem go away for this person? And then not only make the problem go away, to actually improve outcomes. And so that is then when you have to figure out what's the right technology to purpose to accomplish this, right? So it's person or people, process, technology. But I think that with everyone now having cell phones, it's like an appendage.
Right.
You used to think about the old model in government of people would set up a time to go visit you in your office, right? And that was how you got to speak to an elected official. Or maybe they had a town hall and people would come. It's not super effective to do that either, by the way, because, you know, people come and you get 3-4 people asking, things get derailed, and then everyone leaves angry. But social media, you know, think about when Facebook started before it was hateful, because it's kind of mean now, right? Like all these social media platforms can be pretty nasty.
Right.
But when they first started out, it was absolutely awesome because people were reconnecting. And I leveraged it big time because when I was city clerk, I used to think we've got to be up on social media. And nobody was, right? And back then it was all friend requests. But I would say we have to treat any comment about our office as if it's a bumper sticker on a car. Right?
Comment. What do you elaborate, please?
So like if somebody said, oh, you know, we're waiting in line, you know, why does it take 3 hours to wait in line for a city sticker, right? And because before people would complain about it, but nobody saw it. You'd tell your friend.
Right.
But now a whole bunch of people who are on social media can see this. And so I say, we want to watch. We want to absorb this feedback. This is the equivalent, I would tell my staff, of someone coming to our office and camping out.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, what's the difference? Before they used to have to come, and that's how I'd find out. But now they're telling us, we should see this as a gift. Here is like the listening tour, right? People are telling you, this is what I'm complaining about. So you don't blow it off. You don't hide the comment. You get motivated to address it with a solution, right? And so I think social media started to, by default, create a level of accountability that didn't exist before, a level of eyes on a problem that you couldn't hide anymore, even if you wanted to. And so you either fall victim to bad customer service or you decide to embrace these voices and say, how do I become a part of championing them? And then using that as the leverage I need to tackle this issue, to go fight for the funding for a new system or to whatever it is, because you're hearing from the people what their problems are. And that's my job to figure out what's the problem, can I fix it? And if so, to get to work on doing it.
And you're on a learning tour right now. It's kind of really fun.
I call it my thank you and listening tour.
Yes, thank you and listening. And I love that because I'm a metrics-oriented person. Like you look at the data, you see if it makes sense, you know. And that's fun for, I think, to be able to really listen and hear just all of the different kinds of feedback and to understand people at a more molecular level. But as I'm hearing, the social media aspect comes in huge too, because you're right. Those are measurable metrics of, hey, this many people don't like this and this many people don't like that. Is there something that you're seeing over and over, some issues that people are complaining about right now or, you know, that are just the kind of like that has an uptick where, you know, you're like, oh, okay, wow, I didn't even realize these are things that people are concerned about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because there's also theoretically, or you could dangerously fall victim to only listening to voices on those social media networks. And that's a mistake too, to have an over-reliance on that. But I absolutely pay attention. The issues that I see on social media tend to be different, believe it or not. Many ways similar, but also in many significant ways different than the issues that you hear just talking to people in the street.
Okay.
Right? So like on social media, I think it's just because of the nature of algorithms and how they work.
Right.
That like the loudest voices that get the most clicks are the ones that end up like kind of rising to the top of like your...
Everything is curated.
Your 10 seconds is all curated, right? So like if you click on a story, and my social media is like super bipolar because I click on all kinds of thought, not just my own, right? Because I represent everyone in the state of Illinois. And so as much as I might totally disagree with some person who I might think is like off their rocker, like I might click on it just to see what they're saying and what they're thinking. Because it's like you need to have a pulse for what everyone's thinking. And so then that probably throws my algorithm off in a different way than like perhaps somebody who's just like some mom or dad at home and clicking on things they care about. So I'm getting it from like both sides.
But you're mindful of it. That's the thing,
100% mindful of
the
it.
awareness of,
Yeah.
okay, maybe my algorithm is curated.
Yeah.
But, so between...
I think I have a healthier algorithm, honestly, because I'm getting from both sides. And I'm a person who's been around long enough that can make up my own mind, and I have my own values. And what I realize, though, is how like the hatred or the discontentment, because they're two separate feelings, but both exist, are present on both sides, right? Like, and then the problem is that this side is definitely not listening to this side, and this side is definitely not listening to this side, and both sides think they're 100% correct, right? But the reality is that when you're talking to people out in the street, that the vitriol at the extremes is not as present. So I'll ask somebody, what are the top 3 things you care about or are concerned about? And they tend to typically have 2 of the same answers. And then there's like a third that will always be like, wow, I hadn't thought of that, right? And it's not something that's being discussed on social media at all.
So some examples of the in-person.
I'll give you one just from last night, which is really cool. I asked a young man, like, what are the 3 things that you worry about or care about in the city right now? And he said the number 1 was safety. The number 2 was, he says, I think we need to be a city that grows. Like, we need economic growth. And I was like, this is awesome. This young guy, he's probably like late 20s. And he goes, and my 3rd would be, we need much more investment in the cultural arts, like the music scene, arts. He's like, Chicago is such an amazing city, but its art vibe is like underrepresented, and it's super cool. And I was like, that's really cool, because that's not your typical answer that you'd expect. This, I was at this beautiful home. There was a live music set that happened. And before we got in, I'd asked him, and he's like, yeah, the arts. And I thought, wow, this is like funny that I'm here tonight. And we're going to end up seeing like somebody play some music for us. But he was definitely like, the arts are really important. And that culture is a really important thing that makes Chicago open to the world. Right. And he's like, because we want cool jobs. We want a safe environment. But when you're done getting to work and you're done with work and you want to go home, you want fun, cool, enriching things to do.
You're
that
a
are
human.
cultural.
You want to do things,
So it's like, what are the fun parts of being a Chicagoan? So yeah, it's interesting. And then I could have a different conversation with someone else I will tell you what always comes up is crime. No matter how much we say that like the city's doing much better, like it's still always either number 1 or number 2 and someone's response of what are the 3 things. And the other one is, so the crime and then affordability, which is typically tied to like high taxes. You started this podcast talking about your interactions with
assessor's office.
The assessor's office. And why? Because your taxes are probably not as low as you would like them to be. And that's across the board. So people are impacted either by owning the property and seeing them dramatically increase and what that does to you and your psyche and your spirit. But also renters are feeling it because the property owners have to obviously increase the cost of the rent. So even though they're not writing a check to the assessor or to the county, they are certainly paying for it indirectly. And so affordability, but that is of course then tied to the fact that we need more economic growth, right? So again, these are hand in hand, safety, affordability, growth, but then there's also other things that people would love to see, maybe more park space, more cultural activities.
So how do you triage that? Going into office, having been in office, you hear the things that your constituents are talking about and, what you're hearing, the feedback, but how do you go in and say, hey, I got to fix this? What are the things I'm going to start with? How do you triage that? Is it sometimes like kind of like something that needs to be completely redesigned sometimes, or are there spaces just need improvement? How does that work in your mind?
All of the above. Not everything needs to be totally redesigned. Some things need to be improved, but also some things sometimes need to be completely redesigned, and that's really hard. It's a huge lift, and that's why if that's not an area that you feel passionate about or you have some level of expertise, then maybe that's not an office you should be running for, right? If like people really need to consider, do I have the qualifications and the vision for what I want to do in this office? But at the end of the day, you just can't keep operating the way everyone else has operated before you. You always have to be continuously looking to find improvements. And that requires bringing your team together and actually talking to your staff, figuring out what every single person that works for you does, not just farming it out. Like I've never been a farm it out. I'm like super hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
That's why that story of bringing my mom and my aunt kind of resonates, because like, I don't think any clerk before me would have ever thought to do something like that. It's so out of the box, but I need to know how my office runs and is supposed to run.
Mm-hmm.
I know how I want it to run,
Right.
but I need to know what are my limitations right now. And then how do we get rid of those limitations and move forward?
Yeah. Because you're looking at it like you're a citizen. I think that, the lens of the person who is actually on the receiving end, or the one that actually has to navigate the system. Do you find that sometimes is it hard to see the forest for the trees? You being on the side of government and having to deal with the pushing this forward, getting something passed, dealing with all of the, in my mind, I think it's nastiness around it, because everyone has different opinions, different reasons why they want something to happen versus not. Do you ever take a step back technically you're living here, you're paying taxes, you're, driving on the roads, you're here. So you are a part of that. But how is it often to kind of segment and separate the two?
Well, I don't have difficulty seeing the forest, for the, what is it?
The forest for the trees,
right? Yeah. Like I set my vision and I can see it, and I'm like I target onto it, I think other people who are not in your space have difficulty seeing the forest for the trees, right? And I think it's because it's uncommon to have someone who actually delivers on what they say they're going to do. And that requires kind of upsetting the apple cart a little bit. And most, like I said, politicians don't actually want to upset the apple cart, or they're afraid to upset the apple cart, and they're afraid to fail. At the end of the day, I'm not afraid to fail. I think that not trying is already the worst failure I can do for my constituents. And I do really, really, truly, with every ounce of my being, value people's hard work. And that manifestation of the hard work is the money that they send us to manage. So I take it super seriously to not waste people's money, to want to be like the one politician that they can be excited to go vote for because they know that I'm doing my absolute best and that we value their hard work and the responsibility that they've given me. Because like the worst thing that happens to me isn't certainly losing elected office. That's not it at all. I don't even I started off, I think, telling you I happen to be, right, a controller. I love being a mom. Yeah. I love being a wife. I love being a friend and a sister and hanging out with my girls or whoever, my son, my husband, traveling. Those are the things that make me super happy. And I am honored and privileged to have the trust of the people to get to do a job that I love because I'm actually doing something with it. Yeah. I would hate just having the title without the accomplishments behind it. That is so not who I am.
For you also, though, you're someone in the know.
Yeah.
I'm sure your 13-year-old lets you know about what's trending, what's
he
not.
Lets me know.
Understanding society, understanding technology, and understanding how the impact is. When you're different, right? You go into these spaces where you have a very generic look in terms of the people that are that you're working with. What freshness do you bring into that space? Because you have these older politicians that are sitting there and doing things 100 years the way that they've been doing it. How do you come in?
Well, I try to make them feel like they're a part of this change, right? I don't try to force something down someone's throat. That's why, the very first thing I did when I was clerk, and I've done it as controller too, is bring the people that have the touch points with these systems that we either want to change or improve or completely just scrap and start over into it with their opinions, right? I remember we named a button or a feature off of somebody who presented this idea that was oh, here, this is a good idea. We're going to name that feature after you. So it's getting the buy-in from your staff that this isn't to eliminate their jobs. It's actually to make their lives easier, less stressful, and they're going to feel great about how well this system's going to work. And they're going to help us inform the data that we need to make this system the best one possible. Because it's not some outsider that's going to come in to run it. You're going to get to be a part of something huge. Your legacy in this office is that you were a part of that critical team that got this office running in a better way, right? I think there's something really special to that. Yeah. When I was a state rep and I would drive by, YMCA that I helped fund with my advocacy as a state rep, or a school that I knew that if it wasn't for me, that school wouldn't be up right now.
Mhm.
Like there's something really special to be said about like driving by bricks and mortar, being able to point them out to my son and say, you know what, I really fought hard to bring that school. And the same is true for like, I love it that people don't have to go spend a day's wages to go wait in a line. And maybe they all forgot that I'm the one who got that done. It's possible.
We're reminding you.
Yeah, but I'll never forget. And it makes me happy. And every now and then I get some random person who's like, oh my gosh, I thank you for getting rid of those city sticker lines. And it makes me so happy because I'm like, oh, not everyone has forgotten.
Yeah.
But it was a moment where I was able to make people's lives a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the job. And so how we can tie technology into this without scaring your employees, but actually get them to embrace it, not be afraid of it, learn from it, become better for it. And you know what? With their kids now probably knowing more about technology than most adults we know, they're able to better communicate with their kids because they're a part of something special.
Right.
So I think Chicago is like one of the greatest cities. It is the greatest city in America. I think it's one of the greatest cities in the world.
Absolutely.
I call it America's city because it's really perfectly situated as that. But I do think that we need to think about not just getting our city back where it can work again, where people feel like, okay, yeah, this city's working, right? It's moving in the right direction. But we have to think about what's Chicago going to look like 30, 40 years from now, right? Like what's the future of Chicago going to look like? And we're in those moments now because we have access to tools that when I was a little kid, clearly were not on anyone's radar, seemed completely like stuff of Star Trek or Star Wars, right? And that's all here now. And so what's our city going to look like? What's our state going to look like? Those are really exciting questions that don't scare me. They actually
excite
kind
you.
of thrill me.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So last question before we go. When it comes to technology, as you know, it's kind of been the underlying tone, not so much because, as I always talk about technology, but in the sense that it is really impacting our society. And so you find that a lot of people have this very, this aspect of instant gratification, right? Where we're always used to getting things super fast, right? But of course, government doesn't operate that way, is that something that, politicians are typically aware of and they're trying to close the gap on? What does responsible change look like? So that's the first question. And then the other question is, are you running for mayor?
Okay, let's go to the first question. Yeah. I think that, responsible governance and responsible change, it means you have to be connected with your constituency, right? Like people who don't want to make the change aren't going to make it. They'll come up with a million excuses why government is it's too hard to do. It costs too much money. But there's always ways of just literally just being creative that don't cost hundreds of millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars, might just be a different way of providing the same service in a different style. So like when I was doing city stickers as an example, this didn't cost anything. It was just a reshuffling of staff. Do you know how like when you go to Walgreens, you can, if your med's not ready, right, they'll text you.
Yeah, I like that.
Right? So we would tell people, please don't wait in line. If we started up like a little side room, that was if you gave us your cell phone number, we would text you when your sticker was ready and you can come pick it up at this no line window. And that didn't cost us anything. We didn't need a new text system. We were just figuring out how to get people out of these lines. Say, hey, if you give us your text message, leave your application, your check here at this window. We're going to call you. Go enjoy your lunch, do whatever you want. We're going to expedite your application so that you understand that what's coming, right? Like we're going to change the way we've done business in this city. And people at first were like, what? Because that was so novel, back in 2012 or 13 to have people get a text message from their government saying your application's ready.
Oh, it's almost like a sigh of relief. It's like, oh, really? He'll call me back?
Yeah. So we had people on the back side of the office because we only had X amount of, clerks working, people on the back side of the office processing these. And then we were promoting it on social media saying, hey, don't wait in line. Come give us your text. We'll text you as soon as the thing's ready. Go have lunch, come back. Even, you tell us if you need it that day or the next day, we'll be flexible. But that didn't cost anything. But it's this recognition that I get hives looking at people having to wait in line when they don't have to. So like, I could just be like everybody else and be like, well, until we fix this system, This is as good as it's going to get. You still have to wait in line. But we were gritty and crafty. We're thinking, well, how can we do something without having the system in place yet?
Yeah.
Is there some other creative thinking here?
Yeah.
And I had gone to get my medicine that day, and I'm like, we could do something like this.
Yeah.
We don't have a system in place. It's still manual,
Right.
Mm-hmm. But it was as techie, but
Yes.
still manual at the same time. And it gets people
efficiencies.
thinking like, wow, this is different.
Absolutely.
This is innovative. This is new.
Mhm.
And then lastly, on that point of that is recognizing the problem. But then when you do take on these initiatives, understanding that rollout is really important,
Mhm.
right? Because you're adopting the buy-in from your staff, but there's also the customer-facing buy-in.
Mhm.
And if I had just said, I'm going to modernize our city sticker system,
Mhm.
and in year 3, we're going to transition the whole city, and you find out when you come to renew your sticker. Like, imagine the confusion, right? We moved everybody from like an honor system of like, I'll give you an example. You'd come into my office and we would charge you $75 for your city sticker, but we were originally going to charge you $120.
Mhm.
But you say, hey, I don't drive a SUV, I drive a Honda Civic.
Mhm.
So we would say like, oh, we're so sorry for that. And then it would get fixed to a Honda Civic when you in fact drove an SUV. And nobody was like, it was the honor system.
Right.
So you're losing on a huge chunk of money that should rightfully be coming into the city
Mhm.
for the more expensive size vehicle.
Mhm.
And so when we moved everybody to a VIN system,
Mhm.
that's like each car has like
A
your social
number.
security number, right? And we tied that into the Secretary of State's office, which was not the case before. We get monthly data from the Secretary of State's office. VIN number, it's unique to your car. I know
Mhm.
that you're trying to cheat me and we're not going to let you this time,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But what we would do is we would tell people, I would wait in that line. I was super pregnant. I was waiting in that line and talking to the customers, and they all thought like, this is never going to change. I'm like, I'm totally getting rid of these lines. And then when they'd come to pay their city sticker, we would give them like a little write-up, a really cool little flyer
Mhm.
that talked about how next year we're going to need them to show up with this type of data.
Right.
Because next year we're moving to year-round sales.
Mhm.
And here's how you are going to benefit
Mhm.
from this change.
Mhm.
And we didn't just give it to them that day.
Mhm.
Like throughout the course of the year,
Mhm.
we were sending out reminders to them
Mhm.
that next year you can't just show up and get a city sticker. You're going to need to bring certain data like your registration card and
Mhm.
stuff like this. And people thought it's never going to work. But I'm like, it's going to work because we're educating the public.
Right. Yeah.
We were sending out surveys
Mhm.
asking them how we should build out our year-round sales system,
Mhm.
when they should buy it. Should they buy it on their birthday? Should
Mhm.
they buy their sticker 6 months from when their license plate is due?
Mhm.
Should they buy it, on a particular, at the same time as all their cars?
Mhm.
No, obviously nobody wants to pay for 4 cars in one hit, which is
Mhm.
what they used to do.
Mhm.
But now they felt like they had a say. We
Right.
brought the public along with us,
Mhm.
not just the staff on the back end,
Mhm.
but also the people who are affected on the front end. So all of these things have to happen for a successful rollout in the tech space.
Mhm.
They don't happen enough, which is, I think, why people are so scared,
Mhm.
because they think it's going to hurt them
Right.
rather than help them. But the why is really important.
Yeah. And education. I think just filling them in that this is where we are at.
Yep.
This is what can happen, and so tell us about the second question then.
So the second question is, I am not running for reelection as state controller.
Mhm.
I don't know when your podcast is going to air. Is it airing like soon?
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's before election day, I'm going to throw out an endorsement for Holly Kim. I think she'd be an amazing
Okay.
controller.
Okay.
Super qualified, the only one who really has those financial skill sets, which are really important.
Yeah.
We just kind of walk through why.
Mhm.
But I decided not to run for reelection because there's a very high probability that I'm going to run for mayor of Chicago. So it's not an announcement yet, but this was like in the back of my mind, I thought if there's any chance that I'm going to run, I did not think it was right
Mhm.
to run for both controller in the primary,
Mhm.
ask voters to vote for me, and then go up before them in November,
Mhm.
and then in January or immediately turn around and run for mayor. And so, it is something that is super concerning to me, the direction of this city. I love my city with all my heart, but I also love our state
Mhm.
with all my heart.
Mhm.
And I feel that all the work that my team and I have done to get Illinois ready for this growth spurt
Mhm.
could very much be in danger if Chicago's economic vitality continues to go down the drain.
Mhm.
And that's where we're at right now. We're at a point where the city has gotten continual credit downgrades
Mhm.
at the same time that I've led our state to 10 upgrades on my watch.
Mhm.
We've shored up our rainy day fund. We're making forward progress on our pension stabilization. The city's doing the complete opposite.
Right.
And Chicago, whether people in other parts of this state, see us as a rival or not, we're all in this together. And the way that Chicago goes will ultimately be the direction that the state goes. And so I've put too much work into getting our state ready for this growth to only see it put in peril by a city that's moving in the opposite direction. So I want to make sure that if that is something that I'm feeling a calling to perhaps do, that voters can choose my successor, not have it be by a political appointment, and that they have a choice. And so that's why last week I came out and said, a couple of weeks ago, I guess, that my choice is a really clear one. This is the easiest choice for people. Please vote for Holly Kim for controller, and then just stay tuned. Stay tuned. But as part of this listening and thank you tour, I've heard from so many people everywhere I go, like, please do it. And not just in Chicago, but downstate, because people get it. They understand what's happening right now. And we need a person who has the experience, the skill sets, right? I mean, as I said, I was a 6-term legislator, 2-term city clerk, and have now navigated the state through the 2 worst fiscal crises, that 736-day budget impasse, and then, of course, followed by a pandemic. So, I definitely have been ready over the last 25 years to step up. But, love to hear what your podcast or listening audience has to say about it as well. Hopefully they'll, as part of my listening tour, share their thoughts as well.
Yeah, no,
I'm listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So guys, comment and let her know, let us know, let everyone. But I will say, from my small experiences with having to deal with these kinds of large bureaucratic kind of institutional spaces, what you've done is not easy. That is not easy. And so for someone to understand, and it's not just that one changing of the city sticker, like that's infrastructure, understanding the way it works and like willingly want to go in and understand what is happening, all of the different components. But outside of that, looking at a budget that really, really needed change and having quantifiable metrics to be able to back that up. And I think that people want transparency. I think specifically, when it comes to tech, all about education. If you understand things, then you don't fear them. At least, and even if it doesn't go the right way, at least you understand what, basically what was surrounding it. So I really love all of the transparency, all of these like kind of stories that you have just dealing with, like just dealing with government as a whole, especially from somebody who has quantifiable measures of success. So
the experience.
Yes,
Now, are you familiar with these AI schools that are going around the country? Alpha? Have you heard of that?
Yes.
There's going to be one in Chicago. I don't know if you know. You should. This is right up your alley.
Okay, interesting.
I just learned about it. I think they do like 2 hours a day of like intensive, or like it's they're not chatting with like an AI bot, right?
You need people to teach you.
That's
right,
cheating,
exactly.
Yes. But they're learning based on where they're at in their particular educational space, right? So like not every 3rd grader is actually at 3rd grade reading levels, right?
Yeah.
Some might be at 6th grade and some might be at 1st grade. But the teacher has to teach all kids the same way.
Right.
Whereas in this setting, they don't. They each get analyzed, where they're at on day 1. They get 2 hours of that. But what's cool about it is that they get then the rest of the day is like financial literacy, learning entrepreneurial skills, social, emotional behaviors, like really fun ways of doing it. I mean, obviously this is a private thing. I'm a Chicago Public Schools mom, and my kid goes to Chicago Public Schools. And
I teach AI literacy, just workshops to regular people, not so much, just as education. I think it's so important.
But this is stuff that's going to happen. So I would just say like the advice would be lean in, right? Lean in, learn it. Don't trust it yet, but learn it.
Yeah.
Because eventually it's definitely, if you don't do that, you're going to be left behind. And we want everybody to realize that this is a world-class modern city where these things are going to help improve. And we have to have regulations in place to protect.
Right.
But it has never over the course of history worked out to be so reticent to change that you get left behind, because that's what does in fact happen.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I mean, if you think your job is going to go, you should probably go understand AI and then it won't, because you understand it. So no, for sure. It has been such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me.
I loved learning about everything that you are doing and really excited for your next steps. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks. Appreciate you having me too.
All right,
Bye,
amazing.
everybody.
Bye, guys.